Welcome to episode 58 of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerri Williams. I'm a retired agent writing crime fiction inspired by actual true crime FBI cases. In this episode, we are once again speaking with Eddie Freyer, the case agent of the Polly Klaas abduction and murder case. In part one, he told us all about that first 60 days when they were still trying to identify who was responsible for snatching Polly from her room during a slumber party one Friday night in October of 1993. And at the end of the interview, we had gotten to the point where the big break had come through and they finally had a suspect. Now in part two, Eddie Freyer tells us all about what he needed to do to prove that this suspect, Richard Allen Davis, was the person who snatched Polly from her room while also trying desperately to find her. He also takes us through the death penalty trial. I forgot to give a shout out last week to Erica Spence, a listener who sent me a note asking if I could have somebody come on the show to review this case. So thank you, Erica, for the suggestion. Talking to Eddie and learning about this case has been a highlight of my time hosting and producing FBI Retired Case File Review, because I think this story is so important for parents to hear. In saying that, I must also stress the fact that stranger abductions are rare. And I am extremely pleased and honored to let you know that in episode 59, I will be speaking with Jim Clemente, who is a retired FBI profiler who specializes in child sex offender cases. The one thing I can tell you that Jim is going to really stress is that it's not necessarily that monster predator, that stranger that parents need to be concerned about, but that nice guy offender or that nice girl offender that your child knows and sees every day. And if the name Jim Clemente sounds familiar to those of you who listen to True Crime Podcast, yes, it's Jim Clemente, one of the hosts of the podcast, Real Crime Profile. So after listening to part one and part two of the Polly Klaas child abduction and murder case, you can get the next part of that, which is a review of why these offenders do what they do and what we can do to protect our children. And so that interview will be coming up next week. Before we get to this week's interview, part two with Eddie Freyer, I just have a few things I want to remind you about. First of all, I am doing my March milestone contest where we are celebrating a big birthday for me during the month of March and also celebrating 500,000 downloads of FBI Retired Case File Review. And to celebrate the March milestones, I'm hosting a contest where I'm giving away 2 FBI crime fiction prize packages to 2 lucky winners. And we'll talk more about that at the end of the interview. But I just wanted to remind you about that contest, which is open to anyone who signs up for my FBI Retired Case File Review newsletter. I also want to just say once again how much I appreciate and thank you for buying and reviewing Pay to Play, my crime novel about a female FBI agent investigating corruption in the Philadelphia strip club industry. When you pick up a copy of Pay to Play for yourself or as a gift for someone who you know loves crime fiction, you're helping to defray the cost for me to continue to produce ad-free content on a weekly basis. So thank you for buying and reading Pay to Play. I also want to thank you for the reviews, the tweets, the posts, and the emails. Keep them all coming. I love hearing about how the interviews with retired FBI agents inspire, encourage, and educate you about the FBI. Thank you. Now here's the show. All right, Eddie, we're now at part two. And when we left the case, you had just been called about evidence that had been found at Pythian Road.
Yeah, Jerri, we got that call about Pythian Road, and as that information started coming in, the case just took off from there. Detective Pelton was one of the Petaluma police officers that collected the white ligatures in the bedroom of the night of the kidnapping. And he now has in his hands the information of the stop by the two deputies with the trespasser. He has his rap sheet and descriptive data on this rap sheet, and he looks at the white cloth and he goes, that looks exactly like the cloth that was in the bedroom. Larry Pelton picks up the phone. I'm sitting back at Petaluma PD. I'm hardly aware that he's even down there. And he calls and says, I need to talk to Eddie. And somebody rushes into wherever I was, and Pelton needs to talk to you right now. This is pretty unusual. Very unusual. So I get on the phone, and Larry Pelton says this, Eddie, you need to get down here. What do you mean, Larry? You and Mike Meese need to get down here. This could be it.
Wow.
Jerri, I tell this story. I've told this story 1,000 times. As I'm telling you right now, as it did that day, the hair goes up on the back of my neck as it is right now. Because when I recount that when he says that so profoundly, and it hasn't. Nothing like this has happened for 60-some days. And one of my trusted, seasoned investigators says, you better get down here. This could be it. Okay, this must be really important. So I grab Mike Meese. We jump in a car. We head down there. It takes about 30 minutes, 35 minutes to get there. In the meantime, Pelton, waiting for us to arrive, gets one additional item. That's a photograph of the guy that was involved in the trespassing.
Okay.
And then when we get there, Mike Meese and I, Pelton gives us a quick brief. We look at the cloth. We look at the FI stuff, the rap sheet, and the photograph. And I tell folks that Mike Meese and I were up on that hillside. It's kind of like a scene out of a Sherlock Holmes movie. It was foggy, a little misty, and I looked at Mike Meese and he looked, and it was like a simultaneous. This is it. We got the break we needed, and I told Mike Meese, I said, Mike, hang on to your butt. This is going to be a wild week. And I'll tell you, Jerri, it was more than that. Much, much more than a wild week, because it just rushed. The next 4 or 5 days was so much happened in those 4 or 5 days that it's almost hard to describe. So
what do you do first? Yeah, what do you do first?
Very, very good question. Well, I did two things. Well, we locked down the scene first. And then I called FBI headquarters in San Francisco, and I said, I need to reactivate the evidence recovery team. I've got a crime scene up here on a mountainside on Pythian Road. Here's what I got. And so we activated those resources. I called Special Agent Dave Alford, who was an agent in Santa Rosa. He was also an evidence recovery agent. And I said, Dave, you're coming down here tonight, and you're getting on the red eye back to Washington, and you're taking one piece of evidence. He says, really? I said, if you can do it, I'll be indebted to you for life. And he got down there. He picked up that white cloth because the other ligatures were back at FBI laboratory. And I said, you're taking this back to the lab tonight, and they're going to meet you at the airport, and they're going to take this cloth and do a comparison to the ligatures that we took out of the bedroom. He got down there. He grabbed that piece of evidence. I don't know how he did it, Jerri. He got on that flight, and he got back there that very next morning, and they did exactly that. They got him to the lab. They examined that cloth from Pythian Road, and it was a perfect match to the cloth from the bedroom.
Bingo.
Bingo. So we amassed a whole bunch of resources. You have evidence recovery, the security, cadaver dogs, search and rescue, additional investigative teams, etc. And this thing just launched into the final, what I call the final stages or phases. We conducted operations up on Pythian Road for 2 or 3 days, conducting searches, evidence recovery, photography, all that sort of thing, canvassing, the neighbors and whatnot. We immediately learned that the guy that was trespassing, and it was Richard Allen Davis. Obviously, we learned immediately that he was on parole. We got down. He was paroled down to San Mateo County, which is a county south of San Francisco, a good 150 miles away from Petaluma, but still in the Bay Area. And then we got his parole record, and they said, we haven't seen him in 3 or 4 weeks, but he has a mother that lives in Petaluma. We found her. She hadn't seen him. And they also said, he's been telling me he's staying at his sister's home up in north of Ukiah on an Indian reservation called Coyote Valley. It's one of these little, in California they have a lot of these Indian reservations, but they're called rancherias. They're very, very small, 100-acre reservation. A couple of families might live on them with a dozen homes, and that's where the sister lived. And so, based on that information, we certainly set up a lot of surveillances. We determined that he was there. Mike Meese and I went up as soon as we got that information, because I wanted to get descriptive data for search warrants. I just wanted to get eyes on the house as well as Mike did. We were kind of curious. We find this location. It's in a remote area north of Ukiah, back in this Indian reservation. It kind of winds around the trees and hills, and we find this little home with cars and stuff parked outside. And I see back in the back of this property, almost hidden, was this kind of beat up white Pinto. And I told Mike, I said, oh gosh, we can't be that lucky. Can that be the car that was up on Pythian Road? And is that possibly the white car we think that this guy was, reported, in the neighborhood of the kidnapping? And of course, we're not sure. So I jumped out of the car and kind of snuck around and got the license plate and said, yep, that's the car from Pythian Road.
Wow.
Yep. So things were happening very fast. We set up some big operations. We brought out some FBI profilers. We brought out some evidence techs from Washington to process the car. We got search warrants written. I had a big plan to execute search warrants on the house, get him in custody because he had a parole violation. We can at least get him in custody. FBI Behavioral Science Unit laid out a great interview strategy plan for us. Mike Meese and I made a decision that he was going to handle the interview with a FBI profiler, that was Larry Taylor. I was going to handle all the search operations and investigation out at the Indian Reservation. We set up a second command post at Mendocino County Sheriff's Office. So we were managing 2 command posts, one at Petaluma, one at Mendocino County Sheriff's Office. Huge operations still going on at Pythian Road Mountain Site. And now we're launching on some big operations on this Indian reservation and conducting searches and seizures. And we planned to get that car up we wrapped that car up on a big giant burrito, and we put it on a flatbed. We took it down to Petaluma PD. It was processed down there. When we executed the warrants, we thought Davis was at home, but he was not. But he was coming back just a couple of minutes after we executed the warrants, and we caught him at one of our perimeter checkpoints. And that's a very kind of funny story with this young deputy out there manning the checkpoint, he was. This was a joint operation with multiple agencies involved. The Mendocino County Sheriff's Office was very gracious and accommodating some of our needs, and they called in some of their deputies to work the perimeter checkpoints. And this kid was like 3 weeks out of the academy. The sheriff himself called this kid and said, "Hey, you need to come in, son. I'm going to have you work the Polly Klaas case." And this kid got so excited. He was telling his family that I've been out of the academy only 3 weeks, and I get to work the biggest case in the country. I can't believe this. This is great. And I don't have to really do a lot, but I'm involved. And so he goes out on this checkpoint. He figures he's just, this is all he's got to do, no worries. And then all of a sudden, this van rolls up, and it's Richard Allen Davis.
Wow.
He says he almost pees his pants. I mean, he is just like, oh, my gosh.
And it's just him.
It's
just him alone.
He is by himself. And in the video, it says, he calmly calls it back to the command post, which is us. And I say, he did not calmly call it in. His voice is like 20 decibels off the charts. We can't figure out what he's saying. And we finally figure out, oh, my gosh, this kid's got Davis out there. And so Mike Meese and a couple of deputies go out and arrest him out there at the checkpoint. And then we kind of get back on track of our plan. So they take him over to Mendocino County's.
Well, I got to ask you this question about this young, officer. Does he hold him at gunpoint? I mean, does he let him know he's under arrest?
No. It's very calm. He just tells this guy, "Hey, hold on a minute. I need to call something in." He kind of walks away, and he's trying to keep an eye on Davis. And Davis at this time is compliant. He doesn't know what's going on. He's just rolled up on a checkpoint. Like I said, it takes us a couple of moments to figure out what this kid is trying to tell us on the radio because he's so excited. And then Davis just hangs out in his van, and a few minutes later, Mike Meese shows up. Mike Meese shows up, draws his gun, approaches the van, says, "Hey, you need to get out." Davis gets out. Davis is informed by Mike Meese he's being placed under arrest for parole violation, and handcuffs him, gets him in the car, and then takes him over to Mendocino County Sheriff's Office, where we have this whole plan for this interview to occur. And I'm conducting operations at the house, at the sister's house, thinking that maybe Polly is around there somewhere, and we initiated extensive searches at that Indian reservation with cadaver dogs, a couple of days at the house, processing the house, collecting all kinds of evidence.
Can I stop you for a minute? So
sure.
At the Pythian Road property, you find all of this evidence, but there's no sign of Polly or remains or anything like that.
Well, I mean, it's a mountainside, literally a mountainside, so the area is huge, and so we have a small area where the materials, the evidence is collected. That includes, a men's sweatshirt, a short sleeve sweatshirt, a condom wrapper, a girl's red tights, ligature materials, and those sorts of things. So that's in one area of this general area that's very open and forested, and so there's lots of lakes and ponds and gullies and wooded areas. So we're conducting huge search operations over there, thinking that maybe she was assaulted and then he took her down into a lake or a ravine and dumped the body. So we're searching that area, in some places hands and knees. But Tony Maxwell was running that show over there. He's a FBI evidence recovery team leader, and of course, then when we initiated operations at the Indian Reservation, we had to pull some of those resources off of that mountainside to start the search operations on the Indian Reservation.
So I guess the best thing for you, now that you have Richard Allen Davis in custody is to get him to tell you exactly where she is, so you don't have to use all of these resources.
Right. Again, still not knowing where she is. We were very optimistic that the evidence search of the car, the evidence search at Pythian Road, which was, I thought, Jerry, that this case was over, especially with the condom, because now we can link Polly to Pythian Road by virtue of the ligatures found in her bedroom, same cloth material up at Pythian. That condom would have Davis's DNA on it, and that would almost seal the case forensically on the matter. And then we had the hopes of getting something out of the interview or interrogation. And the first shot of that provided nothing. But we were still very we were very optimistic that forensically we were going to be able to charge the guy, even without a body at this point in time. But as things would have it, a very close examination of that condom revealed 0 DNA. It was out. It was used. Apparently, it looked like it had been used. It was out of the wrapper, fully extended, so it appeared it had been used, but there was no DNA whatsoever on the condom. And I say, it's amazing we can get DNA out of a 15 million year old dinosaur tooth buried in a desert somewhere that we've never heard of. But I couldn't get one hit of DNA off that condom that was could have been rich with some sort of DNA material. But it's organic out in certain conditions. It doesn't last forever. In our case, at least on that piece of evidence, it didn't have any. Now we did get out of the bedroom in the early collection of the evidence some very interesting things. The FBI evidence recovery team recovered some additional palm prints and fingerprints from the bedroom that the police didn't see or collect using their techniques. And then we also collected some forensic evidence off the rug in which the girls were playing on. In addition to some fibers that tied back to some of the ligatures, we found some carpet fibers that were not tied to any known source of carpet, whether it be from the house or automobiles. And we also found some hair from the bedroom that was collected off the rug that was submitted to the FBI laboratory. Hair that we could not link to any family members or friends of Polly, as well as one hair that had some root material that actually had DNA on it. It was enough of a sample to get a DNA type on it. One of the warrants that we executed after we interviewed Davis at Mendocino County Sheriff's Office, he was Mirandized, and then afterwards he basically denied any involvement in the Polly Klaas case. The interview ended without revealing anything, but we executed a warrant on him, obviously, to collect his DNA, hair samples, his palm prints, full case prints, and that was all immediately submitted to the FBI laboratory. The car, like I said, was taken down to Petaluma PD and processed down there, and that evidence was submitted to the FBI lab as well. And in addition to that, a lot of evidence from the house and everything else from Pythian Road was all being submitted to the FBI laboratory for examination. So we were pretty optimistic that something positive was going to come out of all of that, and in fact it did.
What kind of hits did you get?
The very first hit I got was the examination of our major case prints to the unknown latent fingerprints taken from the bedroom by the FBI evidence recovery team. And in that examination, they were examining a palm print that was taken off of Polly's. She had like a little bunk bed in her bedroom, and on the top rail we collected a palm print that remained unknown until we submitted Davis's major case prints, which included palm prints. The examiner was a guy by the name of Mike Smith, and he conducted what he says is probably the most nerve-wracking comparisons in his life, and he did 3 or 4 examinations to make sure he was correct. He determined that the palm print taken off of Polly's bed rail was the palm print of Richard Allen Davis. He called out to the command post, asked for me. I picked up the phone. I'm talking to this Mike Smith from FBI Laboratory, Latent Fingerprint Section. He says, Eddie, I've got some news for you. And he relays his findings. And I got to tell you, Jerry, I spent 30 years in the FBI. That was my best day. When Mike Smith said, I can positively identify this palm print as Davis's from the bedroom. And
wow. I can tell from the silence that you're still emotional about it to this day.
Yeah.
Now you got me going too. It had to have been, oh God, a flood of emotion, for you, and I take it everybody in the command post.
Well, it was a typical command post, chaos, dozens of people coming and going, and of course at this time we're revving at 110 RPMs, because we're all this stuff is happening at once. So hanging up the phone and being able to get up and say, hey, can I have some quiet? I've got some news for everybody. And Jerry, to deliver that news was something else. I don't think I ever got more bear hugs from big cops. One in particular was Dennis Nowicki, and he was a big, tough, old-time Petaluma detective, burly guy, 6'4", 250 pounds of muscle and brawn. Anyway, he was crying like a baby.
Wow. That kind of made it all worthwhile, all the sacrifices that everybody had made.
Sure. But what I tell people is, that was my best day in the Bureau. And I also say my worst day in the Bureau.
I know what the worst day is. I can picture this in my mind as the worst day because you still have work to do. You still have to find Polly.
Right.
Well, tell us about that. So, how did you find her?
Yeah. So, of course, we did a lot of investigative. We had a live lineup. We brought the girls up. They identified Davis as the guy that was in the bedroom. All the other evidence and matches were coming in. So we knew we had a tremendous case developing, but we just had one missing piece. We really wanted to find Polly. We were optimistic that we might find her either at Pythian Road still, or even maybe at the Indian Reservation. So those things were still kind of unfolding. And so a couple of days, now Davis is now in isolation at the Mendocino County Jail as these things were unfolding. And I'm up at the Mendocino County Command Post, and it was funny because I'm focused on all these other things, and then the shift sergeant from Mendocino County Sheriff's Office walks in and goes, "Hey, where's Freyer?" And I go, "Hey, that's me." He goes, "Hey, there's somebody here that wants to see Davis." And I, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah, this guy says he's a friend. He wants to talk to Davis, and is it okay with you?" And I said, "Well, if there's no security issues, I don't see any issue with it, because now I'm curious who this guy might be." And they allow this guy to go in to visit Davis in one of those visitor areas of a jail. This guy turns out to be Marvin White. Marvin White is a gentleman who owns a welding shop down in San Mateo County. He quite often hires prisoners coming out of the state penitentiary to work in his welding shop. That's one of the trades that some of these prisoners learn while they're in prison. Davis learned how to weld. This guy hired Davis for only a period of a couple of weeks. Davis stopped going to work. But Mr. White, like everybody else in the country, is reading for the first time in the paper about Davis's palm print being found in Polly's bedroom. That was the big news of the day. He's reading that newspaper announcing that and goes, "Davis, Richard, well, I know that guy. He used to work for me." And like so many other people, he wants to help. So he gets in his car. He finds his way up to Mendocino County. As I understand it, he's never been to Mendocino County, but he finds his way to the Mendocino County Sheriff's Office and walks in and says, because he wants to help, he wants to go in and talk to Davis and say, "Hey, help the police. They want to find Polly. If you're involved with this, tell them where Polly is." So he goes in with that intent. He sits down with Davis.
Do you know that before he goes in? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know the purpose. I don't want to talk to this guy prior to the meeting to influence, what he's going to say, or I don't want any interference about this meeting, because I don't want to be accused of, because he's been Mirandized. He's protected by Miranda.
Okay.
I can't be any part of any interview or attempt to interview, whether it be direct or through somebody else. Because I'll figure out what they talked about afterwards. I'll pull the guy out, after this visit's over, and say, "Okay, hey, what's going on? Why are you here?" I'll get that information anyway. So Davis meets with this guy. This guy pleads with him. Davis says, "Hey, they don't know anything. I was not involved in that. The police don't know crap, And then Mr. White has a copy of the paper with him. He puts up the paper on the window, and Davis reads for the first time via this newspaper that his palm print was collected by the FBI out of Polly's bedroom. Apparently his face goes white. He basically just gets up, turns around, and leaves. So Davis now stews on that for, I think, a very short period of time, and finally reaches out to the jail folks and says, "Hey, I want to talk to those cops," meaning, Mike Neese and us, And so we get word that Davis now wants to talk to us. Now, he's been Mirandized. One of the exceptions in Miranda is that if the suspect or the defendant reinitiates the contact with police, then we can go back in and talk to them about the kidnapping. We certainly got plenty of legal opinions on whether this situation fit the exception, which we've got federal and local opinions on it. They said yes, this is one of the exceptions to Miranda, and we set up a quick interview at Davis's request. He wants to talk to us, and our goal at this point in time is to re-interview him, get his story about the kidnapping. But ultimately, we want to know if he will tell us where Polly is. So this interview reconvenes with Mike Meese and Larry Taylor. They sit down for a 3-4 hour interview.
And who's Larry Taylor?
FBI agent Larry Taylor. He's a profiler. And I'm getting prepared to once we determine where she is, if we gear up enough resources and agents and investigators to go to another scene. So Davis then gets re-Mirandized and he launches into this confession, which I don't want to call it a confession. It's what we call an admission. And so some of the story he tells is, I think, factual, and some of it's not. But anyway, he basically says an admits to kidnapping Polly, getting her in his car. He drives around Sonoma County. He kind of says he gets lost. He ends up on Pythian Road. His story kind of matches what happens up at Pythian Road because, we can match it with deputies and other witnesses, and he knows that. He said he got her out of the car because his car got stuck. He put her up on the hillside just fine. He didn't assault her or do anything. He just put her up on the hillside. And when the deputies came and helped him get out of there and get him off the property, he waited for a period of time, about 30 minutes, and he went back to get Polly. And she was just sitting up on that hillside, just 25 feet off the driveway, just those few feet away from the deputies. And she was just fine and just waiting for him up there. He got Polly, got her back in the car, and then he drove around. He just panicked. He didn't know what to do with this girl. And he found this area, and he's telling Meese and Taylor that he gets to this location in Cloverdale, California, and late at night, he gets her out of the car. He strangles her there, and then takes her in this field and dumps her in the field. And he's agreed to take us to this recovery site, to the body site. And so
do you believe that? Do you believe that, or do you believe that she was actually killed at Pythian Road?
Well, that's a very good question. And our theory is that she was killed at Pythian Road, and there's several reasons why we believe that. He says he killed her at Cloverdale. We believe she was killed at Pythian, but there's evidence that suggests that she was killed at Pythian. But anyway, I'm getting intelligence that the body recovery site is going to be in Cloverdale, and so I amassed a whole bunch of folks. We started heading up 101. We staged at a winery that's just south of Cloverdale. I grabbed Dave Alford, who has returned from Washington, and I look in the crowd, and there's the face of Sergeant Vale Bellow. And I said, Vale, we started this thing 2 months ago. Come on, let's finish it. And he jumped in the car, and the three of us went the additional, I think it's 5 or 8 miles up to Cloverdale. The interview is concluded. He's agreed to bring Mike Meese and with Taylor down to Cloverdale, and so the plan was for us to meet. And I have two mandates from the command staff, the FBI officials in San Francisco. They asked me to do two things. They manage the body recovery site, and then two, we would like you to get eyes on the body when you go up there. We're going to call the family in. We're going to prepare a press release. And when you get eyes on the body and confirm to us that you found Polly Klaas. And I said, yeah, I think I can do that. And I felt confident that I would recognize something, clothing, hair, something that I could say, yeah, this is Polly Klaas. And I tell folks I was pretty naive in saying I could do that.
What do you mean, emotionally or visually?
Visually. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. But anyway, so we met up at Cloverdale. It was very dark, dark night, pitch black. They came south from Mendocino County Sheriff's Office. We came north, the three of us. We met along Highway 101 just south of Cloverdale. It's in an area what is it? It's a kiln where they used to do charcoal burning. There's an old kind of a warehouse, dilapidated warehouse, and then a field. And he led us out to this field where there was a board with some debris on it. And underneath the board, Dave Alford and I walked out. I lifted up the board, and there was a body. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, 60-some days. I couldn't tell if it was a male or female. I mean, I knew it wasn't an infant. And I also knew it wasn't, a huge remains, but, I couldn't distinguish any clothing or anything. So I put the board down. We reversed our steps back. I told Mike Neese and Taylor to get Davis out of there. They left. And, I remember this very distinctly, Jerry. I remember Vale standing next to me. Of course, we were bonded with this case from day one. And he pretty much knew everything that I knew. And I remember his voice. It's as clear today as it was 20-some years ago. He said, "Eddie, it's got to be her." And silence. And he said it again. "It's got to be her, Eddie." And I kind of reflected, and I'll tell you that I was asking for some divine intervention, because in my gut, in my mind, and the totality of everything I knew, Jerry, at that point in time, what brought me to that spot in Cloverdale was Polly Klaas. Everything was there was nothing, and everything that I was considering told me it was her. There was nothing that would indicate it wasn't her.
What was your hesitancy?
Well, I didn't know if I should call and say, "Yes, this is Polly Klaas," or should I call and say, "Well, I've got a body here. Let's wait a couple of days," which would have been the prudent thing to do, I think. When I think back on it. But my instincts were so overwhelming, as well as Vale, that this was Polly Klaas. The family, Mom and Dad, were down at the police station. The news media was going nuts down there. It was a scene that people said was just crazy. And I had one of those old phones, the old cell phones, And so I thought about it for a few moments, and I picked up the phone, and I talked to Mark Michon, who was the ASAC. I said, "Tell Mom and Dad we found Polly Klaas." I'll tell you, Jerry, I didn't know. I had no positive identifier that it was Polly Klaas, other than what I knew in my soul.
What were you hoping to find, like a piece of clothing that you were familiar with?
Yeah, I knew she had a Samba top on that was pink. I knew she had a white skirt. I knew that there would be maybe some distinguishing feature that I would be able to say, yeah, that's Polly. That was my naivety at play there, and when I tell that to my classes and my audiences, they basically shake their head, because today we want to work in certainties. And I think, like I said, the prudent thing would have been, hey, listen, we have a body. We're going to work on the assumption that it is Polly Klaas, and we'll release the positive identifying evidence as we get it. That probably would have been the more safer answer. I'll also admit that I did not sleep that night, knowing that if I had made the wrong call, I would have been probably on some foreign island somewhere by now. But anyway, the evidence recovery folks came in. We secured the scene. We processed that scene for a better part of 3 days. the first thing that they did, Jerry, was they fingerprinted her index finger. Her hands were mummified, and the fingerprints on her left index finger was so well preserved. They took a picture of it, and then they got that picture down to the command post. Now, we had a fingerprint card that Polly made during one of those school visits, where they'd fingerprint kids.
Right.
Dad had that. Of course, we had that in our command post waiting for this day. We took that picture, compared it to the left index finger of that card. Saturday morning, bingo. I mean, within an hour or so, they said, yes, that's Polly Klaas.
The relief.
Relief. Later that afternoon, we had some post-mortem dental, I think, verification, and of course, a couple of days later in the week, obviously the DNA came back. So,
I do want to go back to the two officers that initially detained Richard Allen Davis at the Pythian Road property.
Yes.
And I really want to know that she was killed. She was dead at that point, because you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the Jeffrey Dahmer case, where they had the one victim that ran out into the street, and the police officers actually took him back in to be killed.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being an officer knowing that they might have had a chance to have her alive, or even solve the case without, that night instead of 60 days later. Have you had a chance to talk to them? I mean,
sure.
That's disturbing for me. It's disturbing for me.
That's
I don't blame them. I don't criticize or blame them. They had no idea what, they had in front of them. But I feel for them also,
Yeah. Well, those were Deputies Howard and Rankin. They were very professional deputies, hard chargers. They knew that this guy was up there, was giving them a phony story. He said he was out sightseeing and he got lost and the car got stuck. But they knew this guy was up to no good. Their senses were telling them this guy has something else going on. They detained Davis at the Pythian site for about 45 minutes as they were trying to figure out why he was up there, asking him questions. They did a road sobriety test on him, and their car lights were on, their radios were going, and this detention over this 45 minutes was only about 25, 30 feet away up the bank from where Polly, according to Davis, was just sitting there fine and dandy. And to accept that explanation that Polly would not walk down, because you could see from that hillside crime scene, you could actually see through the canopy of the trees that there were police cars down there. She would have to have seen that and known that for that 45-minute detention. And for Davis to suggest that she just sat there and would not walk down and say, hey, I need some help here. This guy just dragged me out of my bedroom is ludicrous. The fact that Howard and Rankin, they did not know about the kidnapping at the time of the detention. But they, like everybody else, in the days and weeks and the 2 months following, knew very well about the kidnapping and the artist sketch and the person that we were looking for, looked like this. They failed to put, 2 and 2 together, and they've never been able to, give me a reasonable explanation why they didn't. Hey, we had this thing the other night, maybe you ought to check this out, but they never did. Would it have changed the ultimate outcome of Polly Klaas? I don't think so. I think she was dead at that time. He took her up on the hillside, to assault her. That's why his sweatshirt was up there. That's why the condom was up there. That's why that cloth ligature was up there. That's why she didn't come down and say, "Help me." She had been assaulted and killed during this assault, and he did not go back to get Polly Klaas. He went back to get the body, and we did find some forensic evidence from the car that tied to a fabric that we got out of her hair. That the only place that we found a similar fabric was the front passenger floorboard of his car. So if we found similar fibers in her hair, and that suggests that those fibers exchanged themselves when her hair came in contact with the front passenger floorboard, which meant he probably went back and got the body off the hillside, put her in that Pinto, and put her head down on that front passenger floorboard. More than likely, that's where that exchange occurred. As well as some other forensic evidence suggests that she was probably killed up there on Pythian Road. Do we ever really know for sure? Well, the only person who knows for sure is Richard Arnold Davis, but, this story can be, judged based on, how much of it's true and how much of it's not true.
So, did you have to go to trial?
Yes.
Oh, really? He did not?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a death penalty case, Jerry. All death penalty cases have to go to trial. And one of the nicest compliments I ever received in 30 years in the FBI was, obviously, this case wrapped up on the investigation. We shut down all the command posts, the operations, etc. Within a couple of days, and it was unknown to me, the district attorney, Mike Mullins, called Louis Freed, thanked the FBI for its participation, and then said, "I have one more favor to ask of the FBI." Director Freed said, "Yeah, sure, what do you need?" And he said, "I want Agent Freyer on my prosecution team." He said, Director Freed said, "You got him."
Wow.
I was informed that next week, hey, Director of the FBI wants you on the prosecution team. Really? Okay. I started to report to the DA's office that week. Worked with the prosecutor, Greg Jacobs, who remains a dear friend to me today. And for the next 2.5 years, I assisted the DA's office with this case.
Why don't we stop for a little bit and talk about, and I know why, but if you could share with everyone why the state prosecutor prosecuted this case, even though the FBI federally was so involved in it. Could you talk about the distinctions and
Sure. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Quite often the old standard, if you will, in terms of when the FBI assumes primary jurisdiction on a kidnapping case is whether you have a very strong interstate nexus. Usually that meant was your victim taken across state lines, or were there some other very significant interstate aspects to the case? Maybe money transferred, or some of the subjects in your case were located across state lines, that sort of thing. And that usually gave the FBI a very clear jurisdiction on the case. This case really did not have any interstate aspects to it. It pretty much, at the end of the investigation, it pretty much confined itself to Northern California, though we had many counties involved that had witnesses, the suspect, the victim, the crime itself, the bodily recovery, all the major crime scenes pretty much were confined to Sonoma County or Mendocino County. And so even though a lot of the work was done by the FBI, a lot of the search warrants were federal search warrants, a lot of the subpoenas and other court orders were, from the federal side of the case. The assumption all along, Jerry, unless there had to be some sort of interstate aspect to it, we were working on the premise that it would eventually be prosecuted locally. And but that didn't deter the FBI's commitment in this case. Again, remember, reflecting back on the number of cases that were unsolved, I think our commitment to this case was we need to solve one. We need to solve one that is as egregious as this one, as traumatic as this one. Let's put everything into it and try to solve it. And we were lucky enough to do that. Obviously, we wish we had a better outcome, but we did solve the case. We did find Polly, and we found some closure for the family.
So, how long was the trial?
Well, the trial it took a couple of years to get to trial with all of the things that go into a death penalty case. We did get a change of venue, but it wasn't too far. A change of venue was down to Santa Clara County. It was held in San Jose. The trial itself lasted about 5 months. So a death penalty case has two phases. It has a guilt phase, and it has a penalty phase. The jury sits through both phases, and the guilt phase was a case in chief where typical trial, we put on all of our witnesses, a lot of FBI witnesses. We had we had a number of great witnesses from the FBI, to include Chris Allen, who was the chief forensic examiner from FBI Laboratory. He came out and testified for about 4 days on all of the forensic comparisons and linking all the crime scenes together and making certain interpretations of what the forensics were trying to tell us. I had a bailiff come up to me after Allen's testimony, and he said to me, I've been around for 35 years and I've heard all kinds of expert witness. That FBI guy was the best I have ever heard.
Wow.
Yeah. That lasted about 12 weeks. We took a break, and then we came back for the penalty phase. That lasted, I think, about 10 days. And then the jury came back. We had 7 special circumstances, murder in first degree with special circumstances, murder committed during a kidnapping, during a robbery, during a burglary, during an attempted lewd act on a child. The jury found him guilty on murder 1 as well as all special circumstances. We concluded with the judge confirming the death penalty, and the total was almost 3 years from the night of the kidnapping until we got the verdict, was about 2 months shy of 3 years. And I got my life back.
Yeah.
3 years, almost 3 years of a 30-year career. But going through a death penalty case, Jerry, is very rare for an FBI agent. There aren't that many on the federal side, and when they occur on the local side, usually agents get involved as witnesses or in some sort of support capacity. I had the distinct pleasure of having a front row seat from this case on the night of the kidnapping, all the way through the trial process, and the experience was incredible. I must say, I learned and acquired a deep admiration for our criminal justice system, knowing that these kinds of cases aren't taken lightly by the system itself, and the checks and balances that are in place to ensure that the appropriate verdicts are reached are astonishing, and I can tell you that the appropriate verdict was reached in this case.
And what was that like to hear that verdict?
Well, there were some antics during the trial by Davis. He accused the father in one of his statements of abusing Polly, which wasn't true. He showed contempt for the court. He showed contempt for the family, and never showed any remorse. But we had a great judge, Tom Hastings, and that last day during the announcement of the sentence, Judge Hastings said, "Mr. Davis, you have made it easy for this court to confirm the death penalty. I sentence you to death." And I think it validated everything that we worked for 3 years. I know it was a great and tremendous leap for the prosecutor. He was under a lot of pressure, obviously, to get that verdict, but I don't think there was any doubt, knowing the strength of the case and what Davis did to this young girl was hard to understand.
So I take it he's sitting on death row someplace. Where is he?
Yes, he's at San Quentin death row right now, and here we are coming up to the 25th anniversary of the kidnapping. 21 years, almost 21 years since the verdict was rendered. He's gone through all of the normal death penalty appeals and review processes. Those are all over that I'm aware of. And he sits on a long list of people that are here in California waiting for a date. I don't know if we'll ever get there, but that's really out of my hands.
Well, what amazes me in talking to you about this case is how fresh it seems for you. And I take it that's because, you are asked, to do presentations on this case, which I think is full of lessons and best practices and stories about things that, you shouldn't do. And, so it really gives investigators and other agents a full lesson in investigating these type of cases. But does it take a personal toll on you to have to relive this over and over again?
I don't think it takes a personal toll. I think it's, I think, like we agree, it has so many lessons learned kind of components to it. It gives me a chance to help prepare some of our young agents and investigators to that if you do catch a case like this in your careers, and some of them will, there's no doubt about it, by listening to my presentation, I think it helps them better prepare themselves when they find that they're in a very similar situation, whether it be their own wellness, case management, family issues, media, getting resources involved, how to manage a big case like this. And I basically say that if you're going to be a lead investigator in a major case, you have to have two primary skills. You have to be a good manager, and you have to be a good leader. A manager is a person that makes sure things are done right. And we have lots of policies and procedures, best practices, your training, lots of expertise. You pull in on a big case, and all of that ensures that things are done right. But you also have to be a leader. And a leader occasionally, Jerri, has to do the right thing. And you have to make hard decisions on big cases that sometimes go counter to maybe a good friend's opinion or a supervisor's opinion. And sometimes I had to make decisions that were contrary to what the FBI wanted. In this case, sometimes I had to make decisions that were contrary to what the police wanted. But at the end of the day, I try to ensure things were done right, and I try to do the right thing. And if these young officers get an understanding of that a little bit during my presentations, then I think I've done my job.
Absolutely. Well, I know that this case has been profiled on FBI files and on investigative discovery, and so I'll put links to those episodes too, if in case people want to get some additional information. We tried to cover everything that's covered in those both of those 1-hour shows, but I think there's still more things that we didn't talk about in our 2 hours that are in that 1 hour. So I'll make sure I link to those too.
Okay.
So you retired in 2000. What have you been doing since?
I retired in 2002. In March of 2002, right after the Winter Games in Salt Lake City, and so I took my SWAT team up to Salt Lake City. We I don't want to say we partied, but we had a great assignment in Park City, Utah during the Winter Games. We were in Party Central during the Olympic event. We had a great assignment. I came back from the Winter Games and said, listen, I've got to retire on a high note. And that kind of wrapped up a 30-year career in the FBI.
So what are you doing now?
Well, I've done a number of things since my retirement. I've been an undersheriff for a small agency in Washington State. I went overseas for a year to Iraq. I taught, but right now I work for the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. I run it's called the Institute of Criminal Investigation, and it's a great program here in California. We train police investigators how to conduct investigations in a variety of different topics, including homicide, sexual assault, burglary, DV, a number of different things. And I also developed special training programs for officer decision-making. But I'm doing that now. I'll probably do that for another couple of years, and then I'll be done.
All right, so this is almost like an advanced in-service.
Yes, it really is. It's an advanced in-service for police officer investigators, and I get often FBI agents that attend some of these classes, so that's for them too. Well,
I know I've already mentioned to you, I've already encouraged you that this would make, a great book. And, hopefully in the future, you'll have something out and we can all, to read that and also to keep Polly's memory alive.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, because, Mike Meese is no longer with us. He was my partner in the latter part of this. He passed away. One of the prosecutors that assisted Greg Jacobs is no longer with us. I'm certainly not getting any younger. I'm pretty much the one person that has the front to back door knowledge of the case. But hopefully we can get a book put together and get it out there.
Very good. All right, so we've come to the end now, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to kind of have the last word. If you want to sum up your career, sum up the case, whatever you want to say.
Well, Jerry, I quite often finish up by saying that this kind of effort, this kind of commitment, both on the local, state, and federal level, doesn't happen with every case that you might work. In fact, it rarely happens. But it's a great example of how agencies can come together with a common goal where you can leverage the resources that as meager as they might be with a small agency, but you can combine them with the great resources of the FBI. And when those resources come together, that commitment comes together, the objectives come together. There isn't anything more rewarding to see an agency like the FBI get 100% behind a case, and what we can accomplish when we have that commitment is just astonishing. And this is a great example where I was fortunate enough to have the full weight of the FBI behind me, because there was never a time when I asked for a surveillance team, I asked for an evidence recovery team, I asked for a resource. 100% of the time, I got it. The end result was we did solve this case, and it's something that demonstrates what the FBI can do, as well as other agencies when they come together in an important investigation.
And that's the end of part 2 of our interview with Eddie Freyer. As always, back at jerriwilliams.com, you'll find photos of Eddie. There are links to newspaper articles and videos about the Polly Klaas investigation. And I have a copy of that wanted flyer with photos of Polly and the composite sketch of Richard Allen Davis. If you enjoyed the interview, I hope you share it with your friends, family, and associates. I make it easy for you. At the bottom of the episode show notes at jerriwilliams.com, you'll find all of the social media share buttons. I want to remind you, as a follow-up for this 2-part interview, I will be interviewing retired FBI profiler and an expert on child sexual offenders, Jim Clemente, next week. I'm still working my way through the book that I'm currently reading, so I don't have a crime fiction recommendation for you today. But I do want to take the time to tell you a little bit more about that March milestone contest to celebrate my big 60th birthday. Yes, it's my birthday, but 2 listeners will be getting a big gift, and that gift is a FBI crime fiction prize package, which will include a signed copy of my novel, Pay to Play, a display ornament celebrating female FBI agents, a Philadelphia FBI challenge coin, a Philadelphia FBI lapel pin, an FBI case file review, and Pay to Play bookmarks. To enter the contest, all you need to do is sign up for my monthly newsletter. And to do that, just go to jerriwilliams.com and enter your email in the pop-up. This contest closes at 12 a.m. Eastern Time on Friday, March 31st, 2017. The rules are simple. 2 winners, and they'll be announced in the April FBI Retired Case File Review newsletter. 1 entry per subscriber. It's open worldwide. All entrants must be 18 years or older. The winner will be drawn at random, and there is no cash alternative. There is a picture of the prize package at jerriwilliams.com, but if you want to take a close look at each individual item, you can just go to my Facebook page, Jerri Williams Author, and there are individual pictures of all of the items. Good luck. This episode was sponsored by FBIRetired.com, the only online directory made available to the general public featuring retired FBI agents and analysts interested in showcasing their skills to secure business opportunities. I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you come back again for another episode of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerri Williams. Thank you.